Okay, so we are live. So, second round for my guest today, Bartosz. Bartosz, I'm still saying it okay?
That's right, yes.
Yeah, cool. So, we said we would do it round two, and yeah, I think it's for those of you who are only just joining us. We had a conversation, a live. I can't remember. Time goes so quickly in the last year. We were talking about habits and sort of mindset around that. And as we were just talking before we clicked live, you've been pretty busy going on other people's podcasts, and you're also thinking about launching your own podcast. So maybe you might want to just tell the audience a bit more about you and maybe what you're trying to achieve and why you're trying to do that around the subjects, and we'll jump into the conversation from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Colin, for inviting me back on. It has been a little while, and time does fly by. And it. I guess what's been happening a lot in the background is a lot of these conversations have been evolving and growing, and have been meeting some pretty interesting and incredible human beings in this space. And I guess what that has sort of led us to is really thinking about this space and really the purpose behind a lot of these conversations, and why these conversations I guess resonate with as many people as they do. And we really find that talking about the theme of today's podcast, adversity and challenges and habits, and what that really does, and the real need for a lot of, I guess, um, that really resilience and that build up in personal lives. And so really we found that these conversations that we've been having with a lot of different people have touched on a lot of very, I guess, real pressure points that people, I guess, are experiencing in their lives, especially at this time of the year, which is a challenging time in many ways for a lot of people. And so these conversations were really built around diving deeper into why we as human beings do what we do. Why do we, I guess, what drives us and what leads us into the kinds of lives that we find ourselves living in. So, with that said, I think touching on today's theme, and really building on habits during times of adversity and during these difficult moments, as the ones that we find ourselves in at this time of the year. Really, habits built, I guess, for myself as well, particularly discipline. So discipline really is a space that when we find ourselves unable to keep up with a lot of the, I guess, day-to-day routines, habits over a period of time really start to help us to, especially myself personally, help me to build that discipline, which then helps to work through the day-to-days, whether you're having a good day or whether you're having a challenging day. That really starts to reach beyond that space of habits alone.
Yeah, and I think there's so much to touch on. I mean, last time our conversation, and I can link to our previous one around habits and the things that you've been doing. And I was thinking about this conversation, and so I watched one of your previous podcasts, and we were just talking about it a minute ago before we went live with Mr. Purple. And obviously, adversity is quite something that, different periods in your life, and we can touch on that in a moment. We didn't really talk about that a lot, and I was trying to think, how do I see all of those things? Because adversity can be one of those things that holds us down, or we can use as a victim, or to blame, or to say, look, this is our circumstances, and use it as an excuse not to do something, but we can also use it as a platform to say, right, I want to take control of a situation where a lot of things are out of our control and make the best of it. And I think all of that comes around mindset. And that's part of obviously today's conversation. And that led me into a deeper thinking about mindset. So we've talked about it before, but I've done therapy before. I've done a lot of self-discovery. I've read a lot of books. I've done a lot of self-hypnosis. I've done, yeah, there's too many things to list. And what I've come to realize, I think I was looking for a single answer, one thing that moved the needle, that absolutely, was the holy grail of everything that made my life amazing. And then I thought, well, even if I found that, that wouldn't be the same for you. It would be different for everybody else. And so when we talk about these things, I no longer want to say, look, I found the Holy Grail. I think one of my jobs on this platform is really just to have these interesting conversations, speak to people like yourself that can share what's worked for you and why it's worked for you, but understand you at a deeper level and understand, okay, well, what's the triggers behind it? What's the motivation? What's some of those elements behind it that actually allow you to be successful or to build these things into your life? Because that may not be the same for other people, but it may be for other people. And I think we often miss that layer when we look at gurus, we look at other people, and they come to us and say, follow this 3-step plan and it's gonna work. And and then I've done that before, and then I've tried to follow it. And when it didn't work for me, I felt more like a failure. And I was like, oh, okay. And I've, in the pursuit of the Holy Grail to make my life all everything, I think that can be even more disheartening. But when it comes to habits, habits is such a nice general term, but it works on so many levels. But I think within that is this mindset and, what is the triggers? What's the motivation? So all of that monologue, does that make sense in your mind, the way that I've explained that?
It does. It does. And I think, you're quite right there, Colin. Many times when we attempt change within our lives, if, obviously through the process of creating that change, we often find ourselves, in life, and the various ups and downs, and things will happen inevitably, whether it's with work or with health or anything else really that's happening. Sometimes we try to do too much with habits, and I think we touched on this last time we spoke, but that can also lead to failure in that space, and not being able to actually create any meaningful, long-lasting change. I guess really that real nugget of truth that I have found within myself that has created that change through the good times and the bad. I guess it's and I think I've spoken about this in one of the previous podcasts. It really comes down to not trying to be perfect, and really being able to step through those day-to-day, I guess, changes in a way where you sort of give yourself that permission a little bit to fail, and you give yourself a little bit of that space and grace to be able to say, look, I really didn't get it right today, but that's okay, because tomorrow is really another day. It's another opportunity to have a go at being able to create that change. And just by applying it from day to day to day to day, you are already starting to create that change and that process, and that, I guess, coming back again to habit and discipline, to be able to then say, yes, in this area, I am starting to create some consistency, some momentum, which in turn starts to play those dividends moving forward, because then you are able to come back in 30 days, 20 days, 50 days and say, even though this hasn't been a perfect process, I'm able to say that this is a space I have created in my life to be able to apply this particular change. And then through that imperfection and through that grace and, I guess, forgiveness for yourself, you're then able to then create that consistency and that change in time inevitably. So that would be really the that little bit of, I guess, change, that little bit of that element which then allows you to persevere, is to have that forgiveness for yourself and to say, look, it's not going to be perfect, but in time I know that I can perfect the process to a level which I would eventually like to see it at.
Yeah. You said a number of, I think, great things there. I think the first part is about that perfectionism, and I think perfectionism exists in so many of us, but we're probably not aware of it. And I think it's good to strive to getting better, but we sometimes mistake that with perfectionism, and that can sabotage our thoughts or our habits or whatever it is very, very quickly. And I think we don't talk about that enough. I think, and I think oftentimes because all of this exists in our head, we don't verbalize it to the outside world. We just kind of beat ourselves up about it. And so people don't really understand what that war that's going on in our heads, okay, I'm going to take a simple habit that anyone can relate to about running, and to say we're going to go for a run. Oh yeah, today I didn't feel right, or I stopped halfway through, or I missed it, or something happened. And that war in our head can be very difficult. You go, oh no, I've ruined it. That's terrible. But if we're just aware that that thing is going on, and I think what I found for me is I could get too caught in that moment when something hasn't worked and it's derailed my whole day. But if you take a zoom out and you just go, oh, hang on a second, I've run consistently for the last 3 months. One day off is not, there's no perfect world. And if you can be kinder to yourself about that, and I think if we can set ourselves expectations that life is messy, life does throw curveballs. You've got kids, I've got kids, and we were talking about it. And some days it's just not possible. But through the consistency, one day off doesn't mean that you have to throw everything away. And I think that is super, super important. And I think we set out with the best intentions, but those best intentions are matched with some ideal version that looks like perfection. And I think if we can just be a bit kinder to ourselves before we do that, then our progress will feel a bit better. Now, the other thing that I actually wanted to mention, it actually kind of goes against the title of saying, the mindset to bring you through the hardest times. I think in moments where I felt really down, I've built in habits in my life, certainly around eating well and exercising. But someone explained to me that oftentimes when things are, you call on those things when, to get you through things. But when things are going really well, we often let those habits go because we've gone, oh, okay, we're going to bring us up to a level that we're happy, and we let them go. And I remember someone saying to me something about, I think it was around journaling, and gratitude. Oftentimes the best place to start with, feeling better is doing gratitude. And then they said, and then you feel good and your life is going really well. And then you let the gratitude go because you think everything is okay. But actually, if you carry on the gratitude while everything is going well, then your life gets even better. And so I was like, oh, okay. But it's this strange almost correlation. When things are going bad, we need something bad to almost kick us to get going. And then we get to a level and we let it go. Does that resonate for you, or is that just how it's been for me?
No, you're 100% right. And again, you touched on a really good point there, Colin. Managing expectations. I feel there's a real need there to quite often we manage expectations in a lot of areas of our lives, and we do it for someone else, but we rarely do it for ourselves. And managing those expectations for ourselves, I think, is crucial whenever we approach any task. And I think if you've ever had a gym membership, you can relate to this. You get really excited at the start of the year or start of the season, and then before you know it, life piles on, and you go from visiting the gym 3 times a week to 1 day a week to once a month. And so managing those expectations for yourself about what you're hoping to get out of this new habit, this new routine, this new part of your life, and how that might look like moving forward. And is this something that is going to be a temporary fixture in your life, or is this going to be something that is going to be a permanent, ongoing phase? Is also important to define and plan out a little bit there too. So absolutely, I think managing those expectations, as you've touched on, is a crucial part of that process. But yeah, absolutely having that gratitude for your journey and having that gratitude for where you've come. And journaling is a great way of doing that, because you're able to see and track that progress. You're able to see how it felt like, or how you looked, or how things were, I guess, going 30 days ago, 60 days ago, 90 days ago. And you're able to then look back and say, wow, I've actually made amazing progress. And you can see that journey, and you can hear, I guess, that internal monologue on the page, and then using that as a springboard to, again, push you forward towards the next and the next success. But absolutely, being grateful is one of those habits that I make sure I bring into my daily routine, especially in the mornings. When you're on your way to work, or when you're on your way to, I guess, anywhere in the day, looking at what is actually going right in the day, in the week, what you're actually looking forward to. That habit can feel a little bit artificial to begin with, but again, like anything else, practice. And once you start to apply that frequently enough, you start to really feel those benefits of waking up and starting to have a real, I guess, positive mindset and a real strong outlook on your day and where it's headed. So definitely being grateful is a worthwhile habit to maintain.
Yeah, as you were talking, it reminded me there. I had a live with a lady called Sally Stockriser, and she works around emotions, and she said there was a period in her life where she had everything that you would think that you would be happy about, but she couldn't connect with the emotions. And she said something that I didn't actually know, but now makes sense. We are actually built with a negative bias to look at things more negatively, and that's obviously, going back, to sort of protect us in, years past, where, for survival, etc. We needed to, make sure that, we weren't just sitting idle and not looking out for things, because there was danger around every corner. And then I realized, okay, yeah, if our brains are hardwired to look at the negative side, we have to work, harder to bring in that positive side of things. And that, it can't just be one day. That needs to be reinforced day in, day out. And you need to be able to have that, and something that you can remind yourself. So, and although we seem to have this amazing ability to remember things in our past, I know smell is a thing for me that can take me back to when I was a childhood in school or whatever. But oftentimes we're very bad at really looking back in the last 30 days, or even this morning, how we felt. We don't our brains don't seem to take that mental image very well and keep it. I know if we take pictures on our phone, we can look back and go, oh, okay, that's how it was at the time. But the idea of journaling and writing down how things have been, or taking a picture. I know, so I followed this workout routine, and they said every month you do this check-in, and you're supposed to take a picture of your body. You stand there in your pants and you take a picture of your front, your side, your back. And at first you think, oh no, but you actually need that. Like, it's not for everyone. You don't put it on the internet unless you want to see your, if you're very pleased with your results. But it's more for you to actually go back and see your progress. And we don't do that. We can't. I don't know what it is in our brains that often misses that point, if it's even linked to this whole way that we think about negativity, or we just don't capture that still moment of how we were feeling in that moment on that specific day. And I know there are some people with photographic memories, etc., but for the majority of us, we don't recall, okay, I felt this a week ago, this is exactly how I felt. We don't dig into that. So having something physical, like a picture or like a journal or writing or something, is really something. And you talked about it, that motivates us, because motivation can dwindle, right? And I think that's the good thing about having habits ingrained. If it's a habit that you're doing just almost unconsciously, you don't really need to dig into the motivation enough, because it's just, okay, it's just like brushing your teeth. You just do it through the routine of the day. And that motivation can really dip away, because yesterday I remember I was talking to my girlfriend and we were talking about something, and I was really highly motivated about something. I can't remember what it was. I was like, yeah, that's going to be great. Today, I can't even remember what that motivation was about. And I'm like, we think that we can take this ball of energy and just run with it, and it's going to be there for the next year. 24 hours later, it's gone. I can't even tell you what it was.
Exactly right, Colin. And I think about that a lot. I think about why are the negative aspects things that we tend to focus on a lot more than, I guess, the good things that are going for us in life. And again, I think you touched on it. It really is a survival mechanism that's been engraved. It's like, what's wrong is the only thing that you're going to be paying attention to, because that's the thing that can hurt you. That's the thing that can make a significant enough impact in a negative enough way for you to be able to have a life-altering trajectory. And the things that are going well, unless they are amazingly, massively positive, we tend to gloss over. It's almost like, they're all saying no news is good news, because if everything's going right, we don't need to talk about anything. But if anything bad happens, that's when we're going to come up and we're going to have that conversation. So for a lot of us, and myself included, that negative streak and that focus towards negativity is quite heavily engraved. And so we really need to break free of that, because when you're only focusing on what's wrong, then you will inevitably, I believe, find more of what is wrong. And so when you train yourself to look for what's right, you start to see what's right. You start to see what is actually happening in your life that is, I guess, a win. And I believe wins build upon wins, because, you feel amazing about one thing that you've done in your life, and that changes your attitude, and then that builds onto the next thing that you've got to do in your life. So in that space, it really is a worthwhile habit to build up, to be able to train your mind to find the things that are going well, and to not ignore or minimize what isn't going right. I think it's more important to take note of that, but it's also important that we think about those moments, and they really need to be I guess, treated in a very compartmentalized way to not spiral. And when you do find things that you do need to improve on, it's important to say, yes, okay, great. This is a space that I will need to focus in on and put a little bit more work into, but it is not something that defines me. It's not something that is going to be the be all end all. It is just a space that requires a little bit more attention. So critical thinking, I think needs to be done in a way that is constructive, and allowing yourself to find the things that are going right. And one way of doing that is being present and being in the moment. And great example, if you're out for a family barbecue, or if you're out at a pub with friends, or just that, it's a beautiful Friday afternoon and you're going home for the weekend, just pausing and looking out the window and thinking to yourself, isn't this great? The sun is shining, the weather's fantastic, friends, family, whatever else is going for you in the moment. Maybe you look great in those jeans or whatever it is that's making you feel excited, and then just really being grateful for that, and then making those kinds of moments, those kinds of habits become something that is quite a regular, I guess, feeling and emotion, and a moment of recognition in your daily routine.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in gratitude. So I do, and it's really strange because we often think these things need to be massive, and they don't. They can just be the simplest thing. You can, like the sun on your face, or a conversation you've just had, or the taste of a coffee. Like, it doesn't. We seem to think that they need to be. Oh, they're, I'm so glad that, I don't know, I won the lottery, or something magical has to. But no, it can be the simplest thing. And it's the easiest thing to do, right? But you have to be conscious. I think you have to push the noise away. I'm heavily into distracting myself. I'll pick up my phone at the first instance and doom scroll, but it doesn't take long just to go, okay. And so what I do is I do 3 things that I'm grateful for in the morning and 3 in the evening, because it's a nice way to start my day. I don't do anything else before I've done that. I put my glasses, because I need them to be able to read, and I put that with my gratitude, so it forces me to go and find my glasses, and then my gratitude is there, and I just write 3 things. But something someone said before, it's not just about writing it down, it's about feeling it. And if you can take just even 5 seconds longer, just to, because I have done this where I've just written something down and go, oh yeah, I'm just going to write that. But if you feel it, if you go, oh yeah, like that feeling in your body, you're like, oof. It's like your whole physiology changes, and you see things, you go, oh yeah, great. And I started to even be grateful for things that weren't even happening, like, oh, I'm going to have a great trip to take my kids to school, and it was great. And I was like, yeah. And it's almost like I was predicting the micro future, and it was like, yeah, this is really great. And then you go, oh, I'm really grateful that happened. And it's silly, but it's like a little game in a way. And if you can gamify anything for people that like doing that, it's an amazing thing to do, right? And I think, and then I was thinking about these wins, and I was in a course by one of my contacts, a guy called Jay Williams, and where he helped us on sort of mindset. And every week we would have like a call within the community, and he would start every week. He'd say, okay, we're going to do just a round table. What's your win? What's your win for the week? And do you know what? Most of the time it was silence, because people couldn't pick out what the win was. And it was like, and we were thinking this massive thing. Oh yeah, I won a big client or something. No. And then it's strange, because then if someone just mentioned this win, I did 10,000 steps. I'm making that. It doesn't even need to be that. Or I got something. And then people's minds, they drop down from needing these huge expectations of what the win was to down here. And then we all did this round thing. Things moved quickly, and you could see and feel everybody's like thinking change. You go, oh yeah, yeah. I don't know why we need to think up here when everything can be as close to us as down
So
here.
right.
But it really changed the call for then going on. And I think that whole community thing really changed just for that moment. I go, why do we need someone else in our lives? That's not against Jay, because I loved the course that we were on, but we have to go to find other people just to actually say something that was good for us. Oh, I had a conversation with my mum. I haven't spoken to her in a couple of weeks or something. And it's so silly. There's so much beauty in it, but we think we have to be up here. Does that make sense?
Yes. We stack the cards against ourselves, Colin. We think that the wins have to be massive, but we absolutely berate ourselves over the smallest little failure. And so we have to flip that script internally. And exactly what you said, I love playing that game. I do it with people in my lives, and I say to them, tell me 3 things that are good, that are positive, that you're happy, that you're proud of in your life right now, today. Go. And most people struggle to get past the first one. They'll say something, and then they'll just completely pause and can't get to the second or third, and they'll just be like, that's a silly game, Bart, you're silly. Let's move on with something else. You know what I mean? And I'm like, yeah, okay, fair enough. It is silly, but it highlights a real I guess area that requires improvement. Give yourself small wins and let them build into the big ones, and don't ignore or gloss over, but take note and forgive yourself for the small stuff, and don't let that build up into a massive federal case. And so that is definitely, unfortunately, something that's engraved in people, and definitely something that requires everyday ongoing change. And at first, when you start to flip that script, it feels silly, it feels wrong, it feels somehow counterintuitive to be able to start your day or end your day with 3 positive things that have happened. But like anything, it's like when you put on your sneakers to go for a walk around the block, you find the same kind of resistance when you're not getting the kind of results that you were hoping for. So again, going back to managing those expectations and being kinder with yourself and your outcomes and your routines. And when you go for a walk or a jog around the block and you're not getting the kind of results that you're hoping 3 days in, 3 weeks in, 3 months in, you kind of chuck that in the bin and you say, this isn't working for me. But again, a bigger why that doesn't resolve around maybe one reason why you're doing it, but perhaps a greater reason around health and well-being is definitely a much, I guess, bigger why on why something like this would be keeping you going. And then again, once you keep that habit for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, one day you might just find that, it's a funny thing about growth. It'll kind of happen overnight, even though it really isn't happening overnight. It took 3 months for us to get there. But one day you just see a massive explosion in growth, whether that's your overall well-being or your external appearance, but it happens almost instantaneously. And that is something that is resonated in nature quite frequently. You have a seedling or a plant and it's not doing anything. And then all of a sudden, in the space of 2 days, it's grown up, an inch or 2. And so that is growth and that is life. And that is why consistency and habits, build through resilience and build through adversity to become a discipline, I guess, so valuable and so vital to be able to have any real meaningful impact and growth over time.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that before because but like when you just said, just putting on your trainers and going for a walk, I think, you know, I think we mentioned this in our last conversation. We want these overnight successes. We want this, you know, amazing body overnight, and it's gonna, yeah, it's you know, okay, we've done a couple of things, and then we expect to look in the mirror and look like Arnold Schwarzenegger or whoever we want. And uh, but I think if we can lower our expectations and just go, at minimum, I'm doing something healthy, so be that a walk or some exercise or eating healthy or something like that. If we just, and I mean, we can talk about goal setting because I don't know how it was for you, and I know we're going to dig into the adversity bit in a second, but I've not been very good at setting goals because I kind of set the wrong goals. I set sort of moon landing goals when I haven't even, you know, built a rocket ship, and it's just like, okay, need to start at the beginning. Um, but if if you start something that's just healthy, and you know, fundamentals, I think we talked about this before: sleep, eating, and exercise, and take those in whatever measure, whatever's healthy, you know. And I think if you do those things and they start, like you say, they take a little while to embed. But if you know that you're working towards a healthier lifestyle, then it's a win. And then because they're just kind of built in, your expectation that it's an overnight success doesn't doesn't need to be there, and you're not going to see it as a failure that, okay, you're not there. But you know, like you're in your example, you put your trainers on and you go for a walk. Okay, that walk could turn into a jog. That jog to turn into a run, and then that could turn into a marathon or an ultra marathon or anything. But it was, you started something enough in a healthy way. And we talked about tiny habits before, and without setting the expectation of what it's got to be. And so let's just jump into the goals part of it. I mean, are you a goals orientated person? So you know, I know you've done swimming, running as well. Do you set goals yourself? Because like I say, I set the wrong sort of goals, so I'm never really good at doing that. How's it worked for you?
It's an interesting question, that one, because I think I used to be a lot more goal orientated in my earlier days. Um, you know, and I like to just backtrack a little bit too. You know, I think micro goals is a great way of saying it. The other way you could say it is, you know, setting the bar low. I think that can have a negative connotation in life, because I think in life we're always taught to you know, reach for the stars and then you get to the treetops. And I think that's where a lot of this high-end goal setting tends to come from. But again, setting out for the stars can also become overwhelming because, as you've mentioned, you haven't built the rocket ship yet. And so that in itself can become a burden, and that expectation and that journey can become overwhelming. And talking about motivation earlier, and how it wavers when you're having a great day, yeah, absolutely, let's get into that rocket ship and blast off for the stars. But when the day is rough and you just need to get from A to B to C to D to sleep, you really start to really question the reason and the purpose of what it is that you've set out to do. By creating those micro habits and micro goals, I guess, in a way, going back to the example of the trainers, if your goal is as simple as putting those trainers on, and we talked about this in the last podcast, you know, putting it by the door, and then putting it on, and then walking to the mailbox, and then walking around the block. When you're putting in simple goals like that that are achievable, journaling those successes, you're then able to see a consistent pattern of success. And going back to wins, building upon wins, you're then able to start to really, I guess, in a way, spread your wings. At first, they're little butterfly wings, but yep, eventually, as you've touched on, you could be running ultra marathons. And so setting those smaller goals and having those kinds of smaller outcomes then in turn does build that habit. Now, going back to the question of, do I set goals for myself? I guess I do have, and I'm thinking about this because I'm wondering how to phrase it. I believe it's important to always have some kind of a outcome that you're wanting to achieve from a certain practice or exercise. But I feel setting one single goal for a particular habit or a particular exercise, whether that be learning new skills or whether that be learning how to run a marathon, I find a little bit personally disheartening, in that if that is all that I'm achieving out of this particular exercise, then I find that limiting. So what I tend to do is I set a series of goals. I set small goals, medium goals, and larger goals for a particular exercise that I'll be, I guess, attempting. So if I'm picking up a new skill set, let's just say I want to learn how to bake cakes, for me, the initial goal there is learning about nutrition, is learning about, what is it that what are the ingredients, what are the building blocks, and then that works through to medium goals, and then that works through to the larger goals of winning a baking competition. But at the end of the day, having a goal can be motivating, but having that goal can also be limiting in the way that it is, I guess, putting us into a little bit of a box into what this particular exercise and its outcome will be. And when you have a series of goals, small, medium, and large, you're then able to say, well, look, I've achieved all the small stuff. I did learn a lot about nutrition, and that serves me in my daily practices. That has now led me on to being, I guess, recognized within my family or friends group as somebody who can bake a great cake. And then that leads to a larger goal of having the confidence to go and attempt a baking competition locally or internationally. But absolutely, goals are they can be a very risky space if they haven't been defined well, and if they haven't been thought out, I guess, in advance a little bit. And I know sometimes we can sleepwalk a little bit through life and a little bit through our journey, which is why, again, I come back to that word presence, and being present, especially with habits and its purpose and its ongoing goals, I think is again a worthwhile planning exercise before jumping into anything too soon, because as we all know, if we jump into too many things too soon and too many of them don't work out, then you're not building success upon success, you're doing quite the opposite in that space, and working downwards into the abyss, I guess you could say.
Yeah, again, you say so much that kind of resonates with me, but just touch on the last thing, and I think it's, I know we're coming up to New Year's. I think it's one of those things that people feel that they fundamentally need to change, all aspects of their life, rather than focus on one area first and try to do well on that. Again, I've been that person. I'm going to speak a language. I'm going to play an instrument. I'm going to go running. I've done all that, so I can talk about it from a place of experience. And the reality is, it became overwhelming. It's unrealistic that you're going to be able to do all those things. Just pick one of those things. The thing that, I don't know, the thing that's going to bring you more joy. Is it the exercise or something? One of those things, because again, I think this positive message that your brain gets if you can come and go, oh, yeah, I did that, and that builds confidence. And I think confidence is one of those things that we often misunderstand. I always thought, okay, one day I'm going to wake up and I'm going to be confident. But the reality is it doesn't happen like that, because we look at people and they go, oh, they're confident, I want to be like that. some people may have not had things, like adversity in their life that actually pulled them down. In my own life, what I found is that if I actually just do something, just the smallest thing that makes a bit more confident, then I have more reference points to go back to, and my confidence grows bit by bit. And it's almost compounding for me in terms of confidence. The more I do something, the more I go, okay. And then when you were talking about baking, I lived at home till I was very old. So I'm saying in my 30s. So my mum used to do all the cooking for me, and it was amazing. And then I moved out and I started cooking for myself. And my mum gave me some very, very basic stuff to learn. But my girlfriend said to me the other day, she said, "You're a really good cook." She said, "You understand like the heat, the flavors, and things like that." And I was like, "Okay, didn't even think about it." But it's strange how, and when I was thinking about you saying about understanding the nutrients in your life, sometimes the goals that we set that are smaller actually lead us into a very different direction, because the big goal might be, okay, yeah, I'm going to enter a cake baking competition or something. But actually, that fundamental of eating well and knowing what goes well with flavors, it might take your family change their opinion, or they come to you for certain things, and it can change things. So it's not always these huge goals that we think. It's sometimes these ones that define the direction of our life. And I mean, I don't want to be a chef or anything, but I was like, oh yeah, I can. I do enjoy cooking. I do enjoy this. And you know what? Because I never set out to go, I want to be a top tier chef. Well, my goal was just to eat well, because I like to eat and I enjoy flavors. And it was just a joy. And I like cooking for other people. I'm not the best host in the world, but I like to serve up food that's nice and enjoyable. Some of it healthy, some of it not so healthy, but that's a great thing. But that was never like a big goal in my life. So it's strange how these smaller things that just are almost not goals in a way become something that are ingrained and have such an impact. And now I love cooking. It's one of those things that I'm always enjoying doing.
Absolutely. And as you said, one day you realize that you're not as bad as you thought you were, and you get a little bit of positive feedback from your partner or your friend, and then again, that builds on that confidence, doesn't it? And then the next thing you know, well, maybe I can try a different cuisine, maybe I can try a different angle, or anything else. And I think that's pretty much what I'm trying to say with habits, and what I'm trying to say with goal setting and routines. I often find myself, when I'm not feeling it, find myself saying, well, you know what, do it anyway, because the dividends that you will earn in this space, tomorrow Bart will be grateful for it, and you'll be came along and you gave it a shot. And that's true. Every time I do it, I'm always a lot better off for it after the fact. So yeah, absolutely. Learning those skills and having those medium to long term goals, and being just more, again, going back to managing your own expectations, and moving away from perfection, because I think perfection is 100% the killer of any kind of routine, any kind of a habit, any kind of outcome that you're trying to get. I think perfection is something that we can potentially hope to aspire once or twice in our lives, but by and large, everything we attempt is going to be flawed in one way or the other, and that's okay. And that's okay, as long as we have learned from that process, and we can improve upon it the next time we make that effort. It goes back, and I think we talked about this again last time. It goes back to that 1% better. Every time we attempt something, it's always just that 1% better. It's like reading a book. I'm not sure if you absorb everything that you read in a particular self-help book or novel. But again, if we can absorb that 1% out of that particular book to apply to our lives, to be able to have meaningful impact in an ongoing, long-term way, then that is a worthwhile exercise. And I always try and look at any kind of habit and any kind of self-help book or any kind of course or anything that I'm doing in my life, and ask myself the question, do I see myself doing this in 15 years time? And if the answer is yes, then I see value in that. I see purpose in that. I see a reason behind why I would be engaging in that particular activity, and I keep going with it. And I know we keep coming back to exercise quite a fair bit, but exercise, fitness goals have certainly changed over the years, but mobility, general health, well-being, and fitness is absolutely the number one goal in getting out in the morning and going for a swim at 5 a.m. in the middle of winter. I mean, if it wasn't for that, I would have run out of motivation a long time ago. So having realistic goals, down to earth goals, and a strong routine that supports that success is key.
Yeah. So I want to actually switch gears onto the adversity part, because I knew we touched very briefly on some of the things in your life, but I'd like to just dig in a bit deeper, because anyone joining this conversation can look at you and go, "Oh yeah, you've got it all worked out, and you know what you're doing, etc." But you didn't start out that way. I mean, how old were you when you moved to Australia? That was when you were quite young?
Yeah, that's right. I think I'm far from having it all figured out. I think there is a lot of room for improvement. And, asking the question of how old I was when, I guess, we moved to Australia and how all that started. I talked about this in one of my other podcasts, and the journey of coming to Australia was quite, quite an emotional one, leaving behind family, leaving behind friends, leaving behind a country, and it's everything that you grew up with, really, everything that you understood, and coming into a space where you don't know the language, you don't know the people, you don't know the customs, you don't know where and how things will pan out. And I think, for myself, and I guess touching on the podcast about adversity and overcoming it, that in itself, coming from one country to the other, was a challenge within itself. I mean, having to learn all of that, but it's not an uncommon challenge. I think a lot of people, a lot of migrants, especially in a country like Australia, have gone through a similar sort of a process. For some it might be easier. For others, it might be a lot more of a challenge. I mean, for us, it was basically becoming refugees in West Germany, and then migrating from there out into Australia. So that journey is, I guess, comes with its own set of challenges, because being a refugee, you kind of leave everything behind. Literally, you don't really get to take a lot with you, moving from one space to the next. But I guess in a personal way, some of the physical challenges, I guess, which might be relatable to this conversation, would be around how my back had really spiraled off to one side, and how, if it wasn't for an operation which I had very early on when we came to Australia, to stop one leg growing and allow the other to catch up, that would have left, I guess, a permanent mark on the body, meaning one foot would have always been longer than the other, which is then limiting in itself, because you can't really become a cross-country runner with unbalanced body, with chronic back pain, asthma was another thing that was starting to kick off for me in Poland, which was almost instantly cured the second we landed here uh, in Perth, Western Australia, because the pollution just isn't at the same levels as it was in Poland at the time, and so a lot of those challenges early on in the year taught me a valuable lesson. I think a lesson that, look, this isn't something I would wish anyone to go through, but the fragility of life, I think, is not highlighted to a lot of people until much later on in the game. And when you're young, you do feel invincible. And it's not until there is a significant shift in your family, whether it's psychological or whether it's physical or whether it's you're changing locations. And then you start to realize how good you had it, or you realize just how fragile the mind or the body can be, and you really understand how important it is to look after it. And I think that journey from Poland to Australia really highlighted that to me at an early age, which meant that I started to pace myself, if nothing else. I started to look after all the different parts, physical and mental and spiritual and emotional, because I realized what an impact poor health can have. And again, building on wins or building on losses, you can start to really feel how a bad back can spiral into a really bad day overall if you don't manage it in a significant way. So those lessons, those physical lessons, really started to highlight to me the importance of health and well-being and fitness, and I guess they became my primary drivers for the way I live my life right now. So I'm a big believer in moderation, although I don't always succeed in that, Colin. But I'm a big believer in moderation, and I like to focus on the natural parts of life. I think if there's something in my body, or if there's something in my day that's not going right, I definitely aim to reach towards a natural resolution first, rather than an external solution, because A, you don't get the side effects, and B, you get to build a positive coping mechanism, which will then again serve you in a multitude of ways.
So in preparation for this, I was doing some deep thinking about, obviously, thanks for explaining, your journey into Australia. But do you think you did that on your own? Do you think that's part of your DNA? Is that something that your parents taught you, or is it a combination? Like you said, from a young age, you were thinking about these things. Because I'm really interested in, and it's strange because you kind of tapped into the word environment. Even with your asthma, you went to a country where your asthma wasn't playing up as much. But we think about environment, obviously, in our surroundings, and that also includes the people that are around us. And I was thinking about my own life, and the values and the things that my mum and dad gave me, and they instilled in me. Some were conscious, some were unconscious, that they kind of built in. How much of you do you think was your environment that you could attribute to yourself, to the way that you think, to the experiences that you've had, or to your family and your friends around you? Could you put any percentage around it? Could you say one stood out more than the other? Does any of that, could you put a finger on any of that?
Yeah, I guess the journey for me is in that space is definitely a personal one. But I was lucky enough to have parents who, their background in Poland, they were professional ballet dancers, and effectively what that meant is you could equate it to professional athletes. Really, your body is really it's your talent, it's your source of revenue, it's what you will be relying on to get by from day to day. And so they had already faced a number of their own physical challenges and through adversity. And so I was quite lucky in that way to have parents who were already prepared in a way for a lot of those physical obstacles that I was experiencing at an early age. And their solutions were always natural as well. So if, for example, after the operation, whenever you have an operation like that, there is a rehabilitation process. And they really walked me through the exercises, and they explained that initial pain was going to be natural and you need to push through that pain. You need to regain full mobility, because if you don't, then your body will set in a way where you won't ever get full flexibility out of your knee in this particular case. So I was lucky enough to be guided by my parents in that journey quite early on. But ultimately, I think once that initial exercise was completed, I was left to kind of continue it on my own two feet, figuratively and metaphorically speaking. And I did, after high school, I guess, take a hiatus away from health and fitness, and fell into poor eating habits and poor exercise or lack of exercise. But all that did was serve as a reminder at the age of 22, when I couldn't bend down to tie my shoelaces because I was overweight and my back had completely given out. I again had the opportunity to look at my life and say, is this going to be it, Bart? Is this where you're going to land in this space, or are you going to turn it around again and have the opportunity to lean on those learnings earlier in life to be able to understand why you have landed in this space again and how you will be able to work through it. And what I did in that time, and I think we touched on this earlier today, is again, I lean on those micro habits. I went for a job and it was a 45-degree day, and I felt like that nearly killed me. But I got through it. And when I got through it, I came out of it and I thought, right, well, this is going to be the start of the new me. And there was for a while. And then after we finished uni, we went to Europe. And again, new space, new place, new people. We lived in the UK for a while. We traveled around Europe. We lived in Poland for 6 months. And all those habits just absolutely disappeared again. And all the weight stacked back on, the lack of mobility started to impact. And I got back to Australia, and again, I had the opportunity to be reminded on why I need to live my life the way I live my life. And again, got back on the horse and reshaped everything back to the way that I guess I had expected to look and to feel and to live my life. And I've never looked back since then. But again, that highlights that journey of imperfection as well. It highlights that journey of self-forgiveness. You could very well turn around at any one of those points and say, I have put in so much work to get to where I am, and I've gone to Europe, or I've taken a gap year, and it all fell apart. And now I effectively need to start again. But you do, or you don't. I don't know. It depends on your character, right? But in my case, I looked at the journey that had brought me to where I was before. In this case, I went to Europe or took a year off, and I realized that all those wins, all those experiences I get to have them again. I get to get back into shape. I get to say goodbye to chronic back pain again. I get to go back to living my best life. And I think that pull, that desire to go back to feeling amazing, to go back to just, being in a space of gratitude and happiness is something that has always drawn me back to picking up the trade and the habit and to come back again. So yeah, I was lucky enough to be put on the right track by my parents, but ultimately, as an adult, I think ultimately for all of us as adults, that journey comes back and that ownership comes back to us to continue.
Yeah, I love that because I think what stood out most for me and what you said was that I get to feel that way. And oftentimes people associate exercise with pain or some sort of torture, but the endorphins, the feeling, and I think what I know some people, have accidents and they're immobilized and they can't move, etc. Things happen and they can't do that. But oftentimes, for a majority of us, that downward cycle happens slowly. It's that 1%, but it's the negative 1%. It's, oh yeah, well, today I'm just not going to go out. Okay, tomorrow. So, and like you said, you took a year out, and those things, it's not from one day to the other that it changes. So you're kind of still sitting in that world, and then you get to a point down here where things aren't right. And again, if you're in the right environment, you can see yourself and you can go, right, okay, actually I want to get up here and I want to feel how that felt again. And I associate a bit similar to you. Once I've done these things, the amazing feeling that you get from doing that, even if it's the achievement or it's just the physical ability, it's quite something. It's very intoxicating, and I'm not.
Yeah.
I've never really been into drugs, but what a high it is, and I think even more now. So as I'm older, I've got the two young girls, and the other day they weren't very well. We were in the UK, as I explained, and they wanted to go to the park, but we played for a little bit and they weren't feeling great. And I said, oh, should we go home? And they said, yeah. And they said, oh, could you just carry us? And now they're getting quite big. So one's 7, one's just turned 6. And like I picked them both up. I had one on my shoulders and I was carrying the other one. And I was like, damn, this is heavy. This is a lot heavier than I remember. But I carried them to the car. It wasn't that far. It's not like a marathon. It was just maybe 100 yards or something. But I'm so glad that I could do that. And we said this on our last conversation, but actually sometimes the motivation to do things doesn't always sit with ourselves. It sits with someone else. It's easier to do something for someone else. And I don't look after myself necessarily just for myself. I do it for my kids, that I can go and I can pick them up. If they need something, I can just pick them up. I don't know how long that's going to last because they're getting bigger and heavier and more muscly. But I'm glad to be able to do that. And that still motivates me. There is this sense of pride within me that I could pick my children up, even though they are getting a little bit older, and I could do that. And I think, oh yeah, and that brings me back. And then if I can use that as fuel to go, yeah, maybe today I'm not going to do the exercise. You go, well, yeah, and it's okay, like you said, not to do that every day. Life does throw some curveballs, etc. But don't get out of the habit. And so I think for me, wherever I can find motivation, and it isn't always just grit and bear it. Some days it is that, but other times it's, okay, what vision do you want? How do you want your life to be? And I see sometimes, I find it very sad whenever I go to the playground and I see, especially I would say typically dads, and they're a bit bigger and they're having to sit down on a bench while their kids are running around. And I realize, man, you're missing out on so much fun with those kids, because to be honest, they make me younger. Like they'll go, oh yeah, let's play. So I get on the floor and you go, right, that's amazing. And so as long as I can continue to do that, and I think this sort of ties into that mindset of how you even view yourself. It really plays into a part of, okay, yeah, it's not always easy to go and push some weights or go for a run or even just go for an exercise, a walk or whatever the simplest thing is. But if you can build that in and think of that and reinforce it with, oh yeah, and remind yourself of the good things, those things that might not necessarily be, like you said, getting up at 5 o'clock, going swimming or whatever, but actually not what it's just giving you there, but what the quality of life it's giving you somewhere other in your life. I think use as much as that as you can to build that fuel when motivation is either low so that you can continue to do it.
Absolutely. You said it really beautifully, Colin. Being a dad and seeing a lot of exactly those sort of situations in playgrounds and various scenes, quite often dads don't get back into exercise after they've had kids for those very purposes. And exactly what you said is something that resonates across the play yards. Dads realize that they need to be active and healthy, not just for themselves. And the last time they were active and healthy was in their 20s, but they need to be active and healthy in their 40s for those kids to be able to, as you say, join them in the playground, join them on the beach, run around, wrestle, have a swim. All those things, that they are the best days, because when kids are 5 and 10, that's when they're going to want those times and those connections with their parents. Once those kids get to 15, 16, 20, they're off on their own adventure, and you need to stay healthy and active for your own purposes and reasons. But that, again, that whole entire topic comes back to your whys, and it comes back into your wins, and it comes back into those small, medium, and long-term wins that help you to define those goals in a more meaningful way, rather than just, I've got 10 kilograms to lose and that's going to be my primary driver. That is probably, unless weight is a real health issue, for most people those 10 kilograms are like a long-term goal that can happen, but they don't really need to happen, because a lot of people are in quite a good mean with weight anyway. But yeah, how about having more energy for those loved ones in your family? Or maybe you just got a puppy and you want to run around with it in the park. That's a real meaningful outcome as well. And so there's a lot of those whys, but having those bigger reasons for getting out of bed and eating a healthier diet and finding a reason to go around the block, absolutely is vital. And look, for other people, it's the value that they've placed on that particular exercise. By that I mean a direct financial value. Quite often we see similar sort of trends in education, and the perception is the more we pay for it, the better it is, when the reality is public schooling and private schooling aren't that different, depending on how you apply yourself to it. And so for some people, buying a $400 pair of sneakers is your big why on why you will be putting them on every single day to go for a walk around the block, because there's no way and no how I am going to let $400 rot away on the shoe rack when I've just invested this much into a pair of sneakers. And in many ways, that's probably one of the best investments you can make, because when you invest, $400 into a gym membership, you might never see that again. But again, for other people, that gym membership is a great motivator as well, because they need to do things with other people, and social proof, and that friend at the gym is the thing that motivates them to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and get out there.
Yeah, amazing. So I'm very conscious of time. I think this is one of those conversations that we could just keep on having, because I think there's so many aspects to it. But I think a couple of things that I've taken from it, I mean, going into this, the topic is adversity. And when we say the word adversity, we think it has to be this major life event. And I know, obviously, there are things that you went through that not many people have gone through. But adversity doesn't need to be this big event. It can be, smaller things. It doesn't need to be a tragic thing, but you can use that adversity, whatever's against you, as fuel, as motivation, if you've got those foundational things right, or it can help you learn those things, set those goals. So I think it's such an interesting topic. I think it's always relevant. I'm not a big fan of resolutions, like I said, but hopefully people watching this, if they are looking for some motivation to start something healthy in the new year, then fantastic. But it doesn't need to wait until the new year. You can start today. You can read a book now. You can, go for a walk immediately after this. None of that needs to happen on a specific day. So for today, I think we'll say thank you very much. And I'm sure there'll be a round 3 because, like you say, it's a big topic. But more importantly, just before we were going live, you were saying that there's potential that you're going to start your own podcast because there's a lot of conversations around this. Are you in a place where you can share what that's going to look like, or are you just in the sort of discovery phase? Where are you now? And if you can you share any details about that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Colin. Look, first of all, I want to, again, thank you for the opportunity for jumping back on board for round 2. And I love these conversations with you, Colin. And as you know, you're my number 1 podcaster that I follow on LinkedIn, and I absolutely love your content and engage with it very regularly. But thank you. Again, you're doing an amazing job. And I think, the conversations you're having are having the impact, whether you see it or not, in community. So keep up the good work. On a personal note, One Conversation, One Breakthrough. It's a working title, but it will most likely stick. The idea is to have the kind of conversations that we are having here today, and to dive deeper into that moment where someone has had a real defining, life-changing moment which has changed the directory or defined them as a person, or structured, outlined their views on the world, on society, of themselves. The reason why for that is again, like I spoke earlier, there is a lot happening in the world right now, and there is a lot of resilience building, and there's a lot of adversity, especially at this time of the year, and it's aimed to have conversations which a person I spoke with not long ago put it beautifully, to give others permission to make those breakthroughs and have those life-defining moments in their own lives. The journey and the planning, I guess, is at a stage where it will be launching in January. There is already a list of around 20 plus guests that have slowly been accumulating in the background, which will be, I guess, being rolled out on a fortnightly basis. We would be honored to have you on the show as well, Colin. We would love to understand more about your background and what helps you to make you, and what got you onto your journey. I'll be doing it with my wife. So she's got some great energy to bring into this space, and a great way of asking questions and getting information out of people. So it's in the final stages of planning, and it's in the final stages of launch, and there will be at least one episode coming in January, and then working into a fortnightly routine. As I said, One Conversation, One Breakthrough. It will be again live streamed. I think the way you're doing it here, Colin, is amazing, because it is giving people an opportunity to jump straight in and hear it. If not, then it's pre-recorded, so people can always come back to it. And so within our busy schedules, I think that format also helps us to fit in the content in a meaningful way. So it'll be streamed on LinkedIn, YouTube, and then likewise shared across Spotify and other podcasting channels. So when the first one comes out, we would love to do a little bit of a cross promotion. We'll put it up onto LinkedIn. We'll tag all of you guys, and we appreciate your help in raising awareness.
Yeah, of course. So first of all, I think that's such um, a great topic, and I I believe that a changing point for me was when I I read a book. I can't remember if I spoke to you about it, but it was the 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, and I loved the book, but it gave me permission to think differently about how I worked, and that permission almost unlocked this whole new world. And so if you can do that for other people and they listen to episodes and you have people on there, that can change the trajectory of someone's life. Really, really. So what an amazing thing to do, and great that you're doing it with your wife. That's I'm looking forward to seeing the combination between the two of you. So brilliant. You let me know when it's dropping. I will be one of your biggest fans. I will share it as much as I can. So you just let me know when and where, and I will promote it as much as possible. For anyone looking to find you before then, is LinkedIn the best place, or do you have a website? Where do they
Absolutely,
go?
absolutely. LinkedIn would be the first port of call. I'm sure I should probably get a website up and running as well with my name on it, but that will be to come. But again, I really appreciate the time taken to jump on board and have this conversation, and I really look forward to keeping this conversation going on whichever platform we can find.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Well, for today, thank you very much. I'll go and let you, because I know it's the end of your day, maybe wind down a bit before sleeping. But yeah, have a happy new year, and yeah, we'll be in contact. And yeah, and I look forward to seeing what you're creating in the new year.
Thank you, Colin, and we'll continue the conversation in the new year. And likewise, happy new year. Hopefully, you guys are doing something that will go off with a bang and ring in the new and make your peace with the old.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thanks very much, Bartosz. Take care.
Thank you, guys. See you.
Bye.